Andrea asked a question. She said that it seems that our democracy is having a problem functioning, and I wonder how a process-relational framing helps think about the predicament of democracy, because she sent it, and I was like, oh, this sounds like fun. I sat around thinking about it. And it actually, the kind of thesis statement that connects what Tim was saying at the individual level and what you're talking about at the kind of more structural is, I think the nation state and citizens within it are at a point where the challenges outrun our agency. So the challenges of the deal you thought you were handed as an individual, the working hard, whatever agency you have, the challenges outrun it. And when you look at the challenges as a nation state, or the economic system, or even the way our political system works out, the agency outruns it. And it got me real depressed. I wrote down 4 sentences. I told Diana I wanted to try it out on her.
Tim's here too, so try it on.
I'm ready.
I know that this is Trip texting himself his ideas and then going, oh, I just want to see what Diana and Tim think. And part of it, I started thinking, and this is like the kind of process political theorists emphasize this, is that democracy isn't just taking a position, but it's the art of taking, forming, listening, and reforming solutions across difference. And that means it's a deliberative process and not a performative one. And when you don't feel like you have agency, both as a political party or as a church or as an individual, then when the more you recognize a lack of agency, the more your identity becomes performative rather than deliberative. And it makes perfect sense why that would be the case, because you realize your own actions don't have traction or don't have grounding or don't have purchase. So then where is it that you would define yourself as in a performative engagement in the public square as opposed to a deliberative one? And so, like, in our age, like, one of the things we're in, and I think this is because our units of the hyper individualism of modernity and the kind of the function of the nation state, is that the time we need for democratic decision making is actually increasing as the world becomes more complex. It gets faster. It gets more dynamic. There are more things that one would have to take into account, more perspectives and voices and such, if you're going to do a deliberative process as opposed to a performative one. And those are not the incentives in the public square, and those are not the incentives for the individual. And I think it gets even more intense because of the cultural change, where as our culture diversifies and becomes less traditional, where there's not a cultural monologic at the center or some dominant expression, which, moving past that's been life-giving to tons of people on the margin. But then within a culture without a monologic and such, there's much less that can even be assumed or shared when you begin the deliberative process. And that puts an increasing demand upon democratic consensus and what it would look like for a deliberative process. And so both of those features make this sense where our agency cannot keep up with the challenges. Then throw on it that nation states are now having to decide more and more decisions with an irreversible horizon.
That's right.
Those with irreversible horizons, be it how we mess with nukes, how we engage the environment, how we negotiate AI regulation, how we decide about genetic engineering. All those things have a lot larger horizon, and they deserve more deliberation. At the very time, under a nation state using democracy, the incentive structure is more for performative reflection rather than deliberative. And so that anxiety that I think you get expressed sometimes in the individual level, or in the anxiety that comes up in the political consensus, where it's just like, I got to get my base to turn out. I got to level this up. I'm going to play around with democracy. All those things could be the thing isn't the thing. We keep pointing at the expressions of this, but I think both of you are getting at something that when I got that question, I kept thinking about it, is that what's demanded for a democracy today to do well, knowing the challenges, the pace of change, and all this kind of stuff, is more deliberative, slower reflection, because more has to go in to do it well. But the incentive structure for culture, for elections, for all these kinds of things is increasingly more narrow. And so the challenges outpace our agency as individuals and as collectives. And that's something that is killing us. And so when that's the case, the only thing you can think of is savior complex. The only thing you can think is like the one true king who has the exception, right? And in modern political theory, right, it was Carl Schmitt who developed the political theory that gave Hitler the exception in Germany, because they were facing a lot of these things after World War I. And so what you need is the chief executive, who is the one who can stand outside the system, the law, and do something. And so that desire,
and either break it or fix it.
and so that
Right.
desire, even for it, like when we're looking at Christian nationalists, or you're like, why is Bibi Netanyahu still in charge, or all these
Right.
kinds of things, part of it could be that even all the people that are there and are political agents go, we know we don't have agency to fix this individually and collective. And the only option we have, the only thing we can think is be someone who's beyond the law or beyond the structures, because we don't know what it would look like to do them well. And I wonder if there's a solution to it in the present. But that question, listening to y'all, that was my notes to myself.